Welcome to the AnzenGuard podcast, your go-to for all things cybersecurity. I'm Michael Reynolds, and I'm excited to be your host for today's deep dive.
And I'm Laura Wilson. Happy to be here.
Great to have you, Laura.
And thanks for having me.
Today, we're diving into the world of antivirus quarantine.
Ooh, intriguing.
We've got this great article from Seiki Detectives, and our mission is to help you, the listener, understand how this crucial security feature works.
It's one of those things everyone's heard of, but maybe not everyone totally understands.
Exactly. So, when your computer flags a file as potentially harmful,
Right.
it doesn't just hit the delete button right away.
No, it's more like putting that suspicious file in a secure holding cell.
That's a great analogy, Laura, like a digital jail.
Yeah.
It's for those shady files.
Yeah.
But before we get into the whole quarantine zone,
Okay.
I'm curious, how does antivirus even know what to quarantine in the first place?
Right. So that's where the magic of detection comes in. And there are two main ways antivirus software sniffs out these potential threats: passive and active scanning.
Okay.
So passive scanning, imagine that as this vigilant guardian always running in the background,
Got it.
monitoring your system's activity for anything out of the ordinary.
So it's like having a digital bodyguard constantly on the lookout.
Exactly. Now, active scanning is more like a targeted search. This is when you kickstart a scan of your whole system, maybe after downloading something or just as a routine check. It's a proactive way to ferret out any hidden malware.
Okay, so whether it's the always watching passive scanning
Right.
or the more deliberate active scan, both can lead to files ending up in quarantine.
Yes.
But let's talk about what happens inside this digital lockup.
Okay.
Does the file just sit there twiddling its thumbs?
Not quite. The antivirus actually takes some pretty clever steps to neutralize the threat.
Interesting.
The quarantine file is relocated to the secure hidden folder, and it's actually modified to prevent it from running or causing any harm.
So it's not just isolated, it's actually disarmed.
Precisely.
Huh.
Think of it this way. They've taken the teeth out of the venomous snake.
Ah, I like that.
The threat is contained, giving you, the user, time to decide what to do next.
Oh, so this is where the users come into play.
Yes, you have some choices.
So what are our options when it comes to dealing with these quarantine files?
Well, your first option is permanent deletion.
Okay.
If you're confident the file is indeed malicious, you can just banish it from your system for good.
Sounds like a digital execution.
It is, but what if it's a false alarm? What if a harmless file got caught in the crossfire?
Right, exactly. That's what I was going to ask.
That's why it's so important to review the information that your antivirus provides.
Makes sense.
Most antivirus programs give you details about the quarantine file, like its name, location, and the potential threat it poses.
Okay.
If you suspect a false positive, you can restore the file to its original location.
So it's like giving that file a chance to appeal its sentence.
Exactly.
But there's one more option, right? The article mentioned sending the file for analysis.
That's right. You can choose to send the quarantined file to the antivirus company's lab for a closer look.
Interesting.
This can be helpful if you're unsure about the file or, you want to contribute to improving their detection methods.
So it's like calling in the forensic experts
Exactly.
for a second opinion.
Yeah.
So I'm really starting to see how quarantine gives us this control over our computer security.
Absolutely. It empowers you to make informed decisions about the fate of these potentially harmful files. But,
Yeah.
I know what you're thinking. What happens if a crucial file gets mistakenly quarantined?
I was just about to ask that. It's one thing to lose a random file, but what if it's something important like a work document?
Right, and that's where good antivirus software really shines.
Okay.
Reputable programs make it easy to review and restore quarantined files, so you minimize that risk of data loss.
Okay, that's reassuring, but let's say a file actually is infected.
Right.
Can we do anything to salvage it?
In some cases, yes. Many antivirus programs offer a clean option where they attempt to remove that malicious code.
Wow.
While preserving the original file, it's not always successful, but it's a worthwhile option to explore if you're dealing with, important data.
Like a digital detox.
Exactly, a way to potentially save those critical files without compromising your overall security.
This has been really insightful, Laura, but I'm starting to wonder, are all antivirus programs equally good at this whole quarantine thing?
That's a great question, and to be honest, there are differences in how effectively different programs handle detection and quarantine.
I see.
Some are like elite detectives with incredibly accurate detection rates and minimal false positives. Others might be a bit more prone to misidentifying harmless files.
Makes sense. So how can we tell which ones are the top performers in this, digital detective game?
Well, there are independent testing labs that evaluate antivirus software, putting them through these rigorous tests to assess their detection rates, performance impact, and ease of use.
So it's like reading reviews before buying a new gadget.
Exactly. You want to choose an antivirus program that's been vetted and proven effective.
Okay, that makes sense. And that brings us to a really crucial question. Should we always choose quarantine when given the option?
Right. Is it always the safest bet?
Yeah.
I'm all ears.
In most cases, yes, quarantine is the wisest course of action. Think of it as hitting the pause button, giving you a chance to assess the situation before making a decision.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a precautionary measure that helps minimize that risk of immediate harm.
That's fantastic advice, Laura. I think we've covered a lot of ground here already.
I agree.
From how antivirus detects threats
Hmm.
to the ins and outs of the quarantine process, we've really started to unpack this whole concept. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious.
I'm all ears. So one thing that really struck me as we were talking is, the importance of regular system scans. Oh, right. You mentioned that full system scans are more likely to uncover, those hidden threats.
Exactly. It's like the difference between tidying up your desk and, doing a deep spring cleaning of your entire house.
Okay, I can see that. A quick scan might catch the obvious stuff, but a full system scan is like leaving no stone unturned.
Precisely. It dramatically increases those chances of finding and quarantining any malware that's, slipped through the cracks.
So how often should we be running these digital deep cleans?
Well, it depends on your internet habits and how risk-averse you are, but a good rule of thumb is at least once a week.
Okay, that sounds manageable. It's like scheduling a regular checkup with your doctor.
Mhm.
Better to catch those potential issues early on.
Exactly. And remember, even with a top-notch antivirus program and diligent scanning, there's always a chance of those pesky false positives.
Right, those instances where a perfectly harmless file gets mistakenly flagged as a threat.
Precisely.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's why it's so crucial to use your own judgment and review the information that your antivirus provides. Don't just blindly delete everything that lands in quarantine.
So we need to channel our inner digital detectives, carefully examining the evidence before making a judgment call.
Exactly. Look at the file name, its location, any other details that your antivirus provides. If something seems off or you're unsure, do a little research or reach out to your antivirus support team for some guidance.
That's like getting a second opinion from a specialist.
Exactly. And speaking of specialists, another essential aspect of keeping your system secure is making sure your antivirus software is always up to date.
Oh, right. It's like installing those security patches on our phones. They're constantly working behind the scenes to protect us from the latest threats.
Exactly. Antivirus companies are always on the lookout for new threats and vulnerabilities, and they release updates to, strengthen their defenses.
So those update notifications are definitely not something to ignore.
Absolutely not. They're your golden ticket to staying ahead of those digital bad guys.
This has been incredibly eye-opening, Laura. We've learned so much about how antivirus quarantine works, the decisions we need to make and the importance of staying vigilant.
I agree. And, thinking back to what we've discussed, one of the key takeaways for me is that quarantine isn't just about blindly trusting the software.
It's about being an active participant in our own cybersecurity.
Precisely. Quarantine gives us this valuable opportunity to pause, assess the situation, and make informed choices about our digital security.
It's like being presented with a suspect and having the chance to conduct our own investigation before passing judgment.
I love that analogy. It really emphasizes the importance of critical thinking when it comes to cybersecurity.
We can't just automatically assume that every file in quarantine is, a dangerous villain.
Exactly. Sometimes it might be an innocent file caught in the crossfire, and that's why it's so crucial to consider the context and make a reasoned decision.
It's like being a digital judge weighing the evidence before delivering a verdict.
Precisely. And this brings us to another interesting aspect, the concept of risk tolerance.
Risk tolerance. What does that have to do with quarantine?
Well, we all have different levels of comfort when it comes to taking risks, both in the real world and the digital world.
Right. Some people are more cautious while others are more adventurous.
Exactly. And our individual risk tolerance can influence how we approach those quarantine decisions.
So someone with a higher risk tolerance might be more inclined to restore a quarantine file, while someone who's more cautious might opt for deletion.
That's a great example. Understanding our own risk tolerance can help us make more consistent and informed choices about our digital security.
It's about finding that sweet spot between staying safe and maintaining, the functionality we need.
Precisely. And there's no right or wrong answer here. It's about making choices that align with our individual needs and comfort levels.
That's really empowering. It means we have the agency to, shape our own digital security landscape.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating. Quarantine isn't just a technical process, it's a reflection of our own digital values and decision-making styles.
I love that perspective, Laura. It really elevates this whole conversation beyond just the technical details.
Well said. And speaking of elevating the conversation, I think it's time to shift gears and delve into some of the listeners' own experiences and questions.
That's a great idea. We'd love to hear from our audience.
Welcome back to the AnzenGuard podcast for this final part of our deep dive into, the world of antivirus quarantine.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground from the technical mechanics to the decision-making process, even risk tolerance.
It's been quite the journey, but, before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we discussed earlier. That idea of quarantine as like a reflection of our digital values.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. The choices we make about quarantining files, whether we delete them, restore them, or send them for analysis, it does say something about how we think about cybersecurity.
Right. It's almost like a digital personality test.
Haha, I like that. So think about it. Someone who's very security conscious might be quick to delete anything that even remotely looks like a threat.
And someone who values convenience and accessibility might lean towards restoring files, unless there's very clear evidence of danger.
And then there are those who take that investigative approach, carefully analyzing each file before making a decision.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How this seemingly technical feature can actually reveal so much about our, individual mindsets when it comes to digital stuff.
It really highlights the human element of cybersecurity.
Absolutely. It's not just about firewalls and algorithms. It's about understanding our own values and making choices that align with them.
And that brings us to a really important point. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to quarantine.
Right. What works for one person might not be the best strategy for another.
Exactly. It's about finding what feels right for you based on your own, risk tolerance, technical knowledge, and just comfort level.
So if you're listening to this and feeling a little overwhelmed, by all this technical stuff, don't worry. The key takeaway is you have the power to choose what works best for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. And remember, there are tons of resources out there to help you make those decisions, like your antivirus provider. They probably have a ton of info on their website.
And there are countless online forums and communities, where you can connect with other users and share experiences.
It's all about empowering yourself with knowledge and finding that balance between security and convenience.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Curiosity is your best friend when it comes to cybersecurity.
Oh, I like that. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Explore those different options and learn as much as you can about how to protect yourself online.
The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to make those informed decisions and navigate this ever-evolving digital landscape.
This has been great, Laura. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure. Michael, always happy to delve into, this fascinating world of cybersecurity.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of antivirus quarantine. We hope you learned something and feel more confident about using this crucial security feature.
Remember, knowledge is power. And when it comes to cybersecurity, a little bit of knowledge can go a long way.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the AnzenGuard podcast for more deep dives into the world of cybersecurity. We're here to help you stay informed, protected, and empowered in this digital age.
And don't forget to like, comment, and share this episode with your friends and family.
I'm Michael Reynolds.
And I'm Laura Wilson.
Stay safe, and we'll see you in our next deep dive on the AnzenGuard podcast.